And we are live. Hey guys, it's Ayo Olatoye here. Welcome to another episode of Conscious Parenting Live. Our goal on this show is to introduce you to the people and to the ideas that will help you raise kids who are happy, who are resilient, and who have the skills they need to thrive in their world. And one of the skills that we know kids need today is the ability to deal with the overload of digital stimulus that they keep getting. I've had a lot of parents reach out to me to say, how can you bring on someone that can give us some advice on how we can help our kids deal with the overwhelming amount of digital dependence that they seem to have? And you guys are in for a treat today. So our guest today, he's known as a thought leader on habit forming technology, and he writes and teaches about the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. The MIT Technology Review calls him the prophet of habit forming technology. He teaches at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and he's been featured on the Harvard Business Review, TechCrunch, Psychology Today, Inc. magazine, and so many other publications. He was telling me tonight that he's actually lost count. He's also an author, and he's best known for his two best-selling books. One of them is Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products, and the second one is a new book that was recently launched called Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. And just to give you a bit of context, his book, Hooked, if you walk into most tech companies in Silicon Valley, you will find this book on the table. It's a book that's given out at tech conferences and at tech training events. The CEO of Microsoft recommended it to all his employees. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and it's currently ranked #1 in the products category on Amazon. And I say all of this not just to butter up my guest, but just to give you a bit of context, to let you know that there are probably very few people as qualified on the planet Earth to speak about the topic of digital dependence as our guest, Nir Eyal. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please welcome Nir. Hey, Nir, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. It's great to have you on the show. I'm really, really excited for our conversation today. So just to get things a bit warmed up, I know quite a bit about you because I've been researching you and following you for a while. But just so my audience can get a bit more familiar with you, could you tell us a bit about your background in designing tech products?
Sure. So my first book was called Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. And the idea behind the book was to democratize many of these techniques that we see used at companies like Facebook and Google and Instagram and, gaming companies. My idea behind that book was, what if we could use those same techniques to help people form healthy habits? Habits like, there's a case study in the book about the Bible app used by hundreds of millions of people. And so this is a product that can get people habituated to using an app like the Bible app. Fitbod is a company that gets people hooked to exercising in the gym. Kahoot is an app that gets kids hooked to in-classroom learning. Bite Foods is a product that gets people hooked to eating healthier food. So we can use the same techniques that the gaming companies and social networks use to build products that help people get hooked in healthier manners. And so that's really the idea behind my first book. Now, with the second book, with Indistractable, the impetus for writing that was that, some products are so well designed, they're so well made. I mean, the price of progress in these products that we love to use so much is that sometimes we can go overboard, we can overuse them and sometimes become distracted by them. So I wanted a solution for myself more than anyone. And, I wrote this book as patient zero, being something that I needed to understand how to put in its place. I also believe that becoming indistractable is the skill of the century. That if you can't control your attention and control your life, then somebody else is going to control your attention and your life for you. And when it comes to the workplace, when it comes to our relationship with our family, these are essential skills we have to know and that we have to teach. Because if you think the world is a distracting place now, just wait a few years, right? The world is only going to become more distracting. And so it's imperative that we teach our kids how to become indistractable.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's jump in by asking you the question that is on everybody's mind, right? What is it about a product that makes it habit forming, and why on earth are they so hard to put down?
Well, it's by design. It's not by accident. I mean, the folks who build these products understand what makes you click and what makes you tick better than you understand yourself, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Right. I would argue that we could use these tactics for good. And that's what we should do, is to, build the kind of products and services that help people build healthy habits in their day-to-day lives. And I think that's exactly what we've seen in the past 5 years since Hooked was published. thousands of companies have used these techniques to make products that are more engaging and that we want to use. And, that's a good thing, right? Should we tell Netflix, hey, Netflix, please make your shows less interesting. I want to watch them all the time.
There'd be a
Or
riot.
Apple. Yeah, Apple, can you make your phone less user-friendly? I find that it's too easy to use. No, that's ridiculous. We want products to be engaging. That is by design. That's what makes them good. And that's not going away. So if you hold your breath waiting for companies to make their products less engaging, then you're going to suffocate. And so my solution is, there's things that we can do today that actually aren't that hard to do if we know exactly what to do to become indistractable.
Okay, brilliant. All right. So the show is a parenting show, right? And a lot of parents have been talking to me and saying, hey, listen, I can't seem to get my kids off YouTube. I can't seem to get my kids off their iPad. I can't seem to get them off Fortnite. Fortnite is like a big one, right? But when I read the book Indistractable, I discovered that there's a much deeper reason why kids tend to spend too much time on these devices and on these platforms. Would you mind sharing with us a bit about the psychological nutrients and why exactly kids end up doing what they do?
Sure. So let's start with some historical background that parents have historically searched for something to blame forever. Right. In our generation, it was Super Mario Brothers and the television and rock and roll music and rap music and the radio. I mean, it just goes back every generation. Something is taking over our kids' brains and making them do things that we'd rather they not do. So this is not a new phenomenon. One of the best examples is the sugar high. There's this, every parent knows that if you give a kid sugar, they act crazy, right? No, it's a myth. It's not true. Study after study have found that the sugar high does not exist. In fact, the only place we see the sugar high having any kind of effect is not with kids, but with parents. They did studies where they gave children a placebo, something that was not sugar. And then they told their parents that their kids had been given sugar. And then they wanted to see how both the parents and the children reacted. The children didn't act differently at all, but the parents are the ones who acted differently. They're the ones who acted crazy. They followed their children around. They rated their kids as acting more wild. So what was happening is the placebo effect was having an effect on the parents more than the children. Right. And so what we find is that this happens all the time. And as a father of an 11-year-old, I would like nothing more than to have some reason, some excuse to have for why my child is acting the way she is when I don't like her behavior sometimes. But the fact is, it's never that easy. Right? That as parents, part of our job is to figure out how we can help our children by helping them learn different, better behaviors that serve them. And sometimes, that might require looking at ourselves in the mirror and figuring out how we can improve as parents. I know the vast majority of parents want to improve their parenting skills. They wouldn't be listening to the show if they didn't believe that. So it's important that we dive into the root cause of the problem. And I think when it comes to technology today, many people are satisfied with this very surface level answer, right? It's Fortnite doing it to my kids. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's all of these technologies doing it to my kids. And what I argue is that those things play a role. Those are the symptoms, but not the cause of the problem. We need to ask ourselves fundamentally, why do kids overuse technology? And just to be clear, to set the stage, there is no data. There's never been a study that shows that 2 hours or less of age-appropriate screen time has any deleterious effects to kids over the age of 2. Now, the American Pediatric Association recommends that children under 2 don't have any screen time. I think that's a good recommendation. Of course, the tech companies themselves tell you don't give your kids, a social media app before the age of 13. It drives me crazy when I see parents giving their kids social media products before that age. I mean, if the company itself tells you don't let your kid use this before they reach a certain age, why would you not do what they tell you to do? So please do what the companies tell you. I think kids don't need social media until college. Personally, I don't see the upside of it, but at least do what the companies tell you and don't give your kids social media access until age 13. But all that aside, when we see what happens to children who are overusing technology, that's where we start to see some of the problem. No problems have been found for 2 hours or less of age-appropriate content. Where we do start seeing problems is when kids are using their devices 5, 6, 7 hours a day. What's going on there? What's the real reason for what's happening? And the more I researched this topic, and at first I wanted to blame the technology, right? I wanted it to be about, turning it off and cutting it off and setting strict rules. And that would be what would get kids to back on track. But here's the thing. Let's be honest with ourselves. If Facebook and TikTok and Instagram all shut down, do we really think our kids would just start reading Shakespeare in their free time? Of course not.
Probably not.
Right? They do the same stuff we used to do as kids. What did we used to do? We would hang out. We would, walk around the neighborhood. We would vandalize stuff. We would get into trouble. And if you look at everything that hurts kids, statistically, there's only one thing that is going up, and that is suicide. It's true that from a historical low of about 2014, we see a rise in suicide only in the United States for some reason. We don't know why. It's not happening in other OECD countries, which doesn't make any sense, because if technology was the source of the problem, well, the Japanese, the Nordic countries, many of these countries have had these technologies just as long as we have, if not longer, and their suicide rate is going down. So there's some kind of sickness going on in this country. We don't know exactly what it is, but let's put that aside. If you look at all the other statistics of what hurts kids, we see that everything is headed in the right direction. So truancy, record lows, drug abuse, record lows, pregnancy, record lows, murder rates, record lows. All of these things are at record lows. I mean, this was supposed to be the generation of the super predator. There are juvenile detention centers that are empty, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, if we're going to blame technology, we also have to look at the potential upsides, right? It's never so black and white. We have to ask ourselves, what are kids doing? How much time are they spending online? And what would they do if they were not using these devices? And the answer is they'd be getting into trouble, right? So if you wanted to invent a device to keep kids safe indoors, off the streets, off the roads, maybe you would invent something like a video game. Right? It's something to consider, that maybe there's an upside to many of these things. Now, I do believe that excessive use is a problem. But to really tackle excessive use, let's dig a layer deeper. Okay, let's really understand why kids overuse. And so this is where we get into the idea of psychological nutrients. So there is some very old research done by two psychologists by the name of Deci and Ryan. This research is about 50 years old, and they propose what's called self-determination theory. Self-determination theory is the most widely studied and accepted theory of human motivation and flourishing. And here's what self-determination theory says. Self-determination theory says that every human being on the face of the earth, child or adult, needs three things for psychological well-being and flourishing. And those three things are a sense of competency, autonomy, and relatedness. And when we miss these three things offline, we look for these things online. This is called the needs displacement hypothesis. So let's take these one at a time. Competency, something that we see the rise of in the United States, at least, around the same time that children started, that more kids started having access to cell phones and to social media products and games. We also see the rise of standardized testing. And we see the rise of teachers teaching towards these standardized tests. So we have a subpopulation of students who are told several times a year that they are not competent. Right? With all this teaching towards the test, they constantly hear this message, you are not competent. And we know that we crave this need to feel competency, to feel good at something. So what does a child do when they don't feel competent in the real world? They look for competency in the virtual world. And so they go to a game like, Minecraft or Fortnite or you name it, and they feel good. They feel competent. They feel in control. That feels good. Now let's talk about agency. All of us need the sense that we are in control of our environment. We need that feeling that we have power, that we have some freedom, agency. That's a fundamental psychological nutrient. And when we think about children today, studies have found that children today are the most regulated generation in history. That there was work done that found that the average American child has 10 times as many restrictions placed on them as an adult, twice as many as a convicted incarcerated felon.
Whoa.
There are only two places in society where we can tell people where to go, what to think, how to dress, who to be friends with, what to eat, and that is school and prison. And so is it any surprise when our kids come home from school, they want freedom. They want to feel in control of something. They want agency. And again, if they don't get it offline, where do they get it? They get it online.
Online.
So they go play games where they feel like gods. That feels good, right? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But when we think about it in excess, we have to ask why, what are they getting out of these experiences? And the fact is that they don't feel enough competency and agency in the real world because our kids are so overscheduled. So this leads me to the third part, the relatedness component that Deci and Ryan tells us. Relatedness is the need to be understood by others and to understand others yourself. This is a fundamental human need. It's the ability to socialize, to have peers, to do what's called free play. And we've seen that free play, the number of hours that kids have for free play, meaning time to play without the supervision and the rule making of coaches and parents and teachers, time for kids just to be kids. That time that kids have to do this is at a record low. The neighborhoods of this country used to sing with the sound of kids playing, and you don't hear that anymore. And the reason you don't hear about that anymore is because the media has freaked everybody out. Every parent is so afraid their kid is going to be abducted in stranger danger, which is ridiculous. This is the safest time in American history to be a child. And second, we schedule our kids, if you have means, right? If you're economically don't have the means and you just keep your kids indoors all day, if you do have the economic means, well, then you schedule your kid to the hilt between the test prep and Mandarin and swimming and ballet and all of these extracurricular activities. Kids have no time for free play. And free play is the most psychologically, is the most important thing you can do for your kid's psychological well-being. Because it's one thing if a parent tells you what to do. It's a whole nother story when a member of your peer group, when one of your friends says, hey, if you act that way, we're not going to be friends. I'm not going to like playing with you anymore. It's incredibly important. This is why we have a generation of so many fragile children today, because they haven't dealt with that conflict that comes from natural play. So when kids don't get that socialization offline, where do they go? Well, TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram. They use social media to connect with other people, just like we used to do on the telephone in our generation, right? And so that's the big lesson. If kids do not have enough of these three things, competency, autonomy, and relatedness, we should not be surprised that they look for these things online when they can't find them offline.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so now think about a parent who's listening to everything that you're saying right now and realizing, okay, so one, things A, may not be as bad as I thought they were, and B, there are probably real reasons why my kid may be overusing tech. What are the things, what kind of advice would you give that parent? And if you want to go through the 4-step model, the Indistractable model, to explain how parents can begin to help their kids to begin to hack back, what would you tell that parent?
Sure. So there's 4 steps to becoming indistractable. And these 4 steps are the same steps that we would use as adults that we can teach our children. So the first step is to understand those internal triggers. And once we understand what they're missing, the internal triggers, by the way, are these uncomfortable emotional states. So the fact is we turn to our distractions, whether it's our distractions because we check email too much, or we stay at work too much, or we drink too much, whatever the case might be, we are looking to feel something different. And if we don't understand that in ourselves and we don't understand that in our kids, we can't really do anything about the problem. So the first step is to understand what you are looking to escape from. What uncomfortable sensation are you escaping through a distraction? The next step is to make time for traction. So one of the things that drives me crazy is when people complain about how distracting things are today, and they have no idea what they got distracted from, right? If I looked at your calendar and it's blank, there's nothing on your calendar, don't be surprised when someone distracts you, right? We spend so much energy keeping our money safe and our possessions safe, right? We have home security systems. We have things under lock and key. We have storage units to keep our stuff safe. And yet, when it comes to our time, something that everyone on earth only gets the same amount of, we just give it away, right? When our boss wants us, when our kids want us, when our spouse wants us, when social media wants us, when the news wants us, sure, take my time, take my attention. The fact is, if you don't plan your time, somebody's going to steal it from you. And so it's very simple. Keep a calendar, and not just, one thing here, one thing day, but your entire day needs to be planned out. Now, that doesn't mean that if you fall off track, you beat yourself up. No, it just means that you can look at that calendar and understand that anything that is not on that calendar is a distraction. Okay. So that's turning your values into time, making time for traction in your day by planning out your day. And we can teach our kids how to do the same exact thing, including when it comes to children, making sure you are making time for free play. Before you sign them up for the baseball league, before you sign them up for the test prep, is there time in their day to do the most psychological important thing that you could give them in terms of their well-being and flourishing, which is time for free play. Find other parents who agree with you about the importance of letting kids play together and book time for that in your day, just like you would book the other things in their day, right? We drop everything for soccer practice, but we don't give time for kids to be kids, right? It is very important that kids have time for free play. And you'd be amazed, when we tell kids, oh, get off your computer, get off Fortnite, stop doing that, but we don't give them an alternative for what to do, right? There's no friends around. There's no park for them to play in. They're just stuck inside. What do we expect them to do? They'll do what we did. We'll watch TV, which is not much better. Same negative psychological effects as too much TV, by the way. So we have to give kids healthy options like free play with their friends. And then the next thing we can do is to hack back the external triggers. This is the third step, where what we want to do here is to make sure that these external triggers, the pings, the dings, the rings from these devices don't get in the way of things that are important for our children's health and well-being, principally sleep. So I believe from all the data I've seen, the reason that we see these deleterious effects with technology is not because of the technology itself. It's because of what the technology eats up. It eats up our time. And so that means that there's a very simple solution here. We have to protect kids' sleep. We know that the data is pretty conclusive. Adults and children need adequate sleep. But when we let our children or ourselves sleep next to our cell phones, that is interrupting our sleep. And it's not good for our well-being. So that means I can't think of a good reason why a child needs a television screen in their bedroom. Why do they need to sleep next to their cell phone? Why do they need the computer and the iPad in their room? I don't know a good reason, frankly. That stuff can be left in communal spaces. We need to, of course, put those devices outside our bedrooms as well to set a good example. But there's other things that we can do to hack back these external triggers. Well, by the way, one of the questions I oftentimes hear, how do you know a child is ready for technology? The answer is very much like a swimming pool, right? Swimming pools kill thousands of children, right? Thousands of children die every year from swimming pools. They're very dangerous. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't let a kid swim in a swimming pool. We teach them how to swim. And so the same goes for our technology. The way we know a child is ready to use a technology is whether they can handle it properly. Principally, do they know how to turn it off? Can they use the do not disturb feature when they need to do homework? Can they put the phone away when it's time for dinner with the family? That's the test. And if they don't pass the test, just like we wouldn't push them into the swimming pool before they're ready, we can't let them use their devices before we know how to turn them off. And then finally, we can use pacts. That's the fourth step. We can use these pre-commitments to help us stay on track. And the beauty of this is that there's all kinds of technology out there, much of it free, to help us stay on track. So an app that I use almost every day, my daughter uses it as well, she loves it, is called the Forest app. Forest is this very simple app that when you want to do focused work, let's say the kid's doing homework or you need to do something that requires focus, you dial in how many minutes you want to do focused work for, you push go, and this little virtual tree is planted. And if you pick up the phone and do anything with it, the little virtual tree dies. Okay. So it's enough of a disincentive to remind you, oh, that's not what you want to do. It's like a little game you play with yourself to remind you, nope, you wanted to stay on track here. My daughter loves it. She, you can accrue a forest of trees that you've earned over time. And that's a form of a pre-commitment, a pact you have made with yourself. So those are the 4 tactical steps around mastering internal triggers, making time for traction, hacking back external triggers, and preventing distraction with pacts. The one other thing I have to tell you is that when it comes to raising indistractable children, the best thing you can do is to become indistractable yourself, because children are hypocrisy detection machines, right? They love nothing more than calling you out when you don't obey your own rules. So you can't tell your kid to get off Fortnite while you're checking email. It doesn't work that way, right? They can sense the hypocrisy. And so what we have to do as parents is to make sure that we are setting a good example ourselves.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So here's another question for you right now. In a scenario, imagine a scenario where a parent is listening to all of this and they know they've been bad models already because they're always on their cell phones. The kids spend a whole lot of time on tech already. what are the steps they can take when it comes to, if they follow the initial set of things and they want to teach their kids how to make pacts? There's a beautiful story you give when you talk to your daughter about her time on the iPad and when she talked about how many episodes she was going to watch. Can you just share that and illustrate how people can initiate these kind of pacts with their kids?
Sure, sure. So the idea here is to use this technology with intent, right? That's the difference between traction and distraction. Traction is any action that we do with intent, and distraction is anything that is not traction, things that we are not doing with intent. And so the idea here that we don't want to tell our kids that technology is evil and it's melting your brain and it's going to do this. That's silly. Think about it. We want our kids to be tech literate. If we want them to get good jobs out there when they leave our home, we want them to be conversant with technology. So don't give them a complex that technology is somehow evil. That's silly. Technology, the cost of using a screen is an opportunity cost, meaning the time you spend on an app or a video game is time you're not spending doing something else, playing with your friends, interacting with a different form of media, like reading a book, being with your mommy and daddy. That's the cost of using this screen time. So when we expressed this to my daughter when she was just 5 years old, we told her this and we asked her, how much screen time do you want? We wanted to give her the agency. Remember, agency is one of these 3 critical psychological nutrients. And so we asked her, we said, how much time do you think is good for you to have extracurricular screen time? And this was just when she was 5 years old. And she told me she wanted 2 episodes. I thought she was going to say like all day, but she said 2 episodes, 2 episodes, meaning 2 Netflix shows, which is fine. That's 45 minutes. And again, there's been no studies that show any deleterious effects to 2 hours or less of age appropriate screen time. And so I said, fine, you can have those 45 minutes, but you're going to be in charge in enforcing your own rule. How can you enforce this rule for yourself? Because remember, we're not raising kids. We are raising future adults. And so the goal of every parent should be to raise a person who can do this for themselves. What good is it if you're always the one telling your child what to do? When they leave the home and they're outside of your view and they go over to a friend's house, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to do whatever they want, right? When you're not around. So instead, the idea was, how can we teach her these valuable skills so that she can self-regulate? And so she came up with the idea of asking Alexa, the Amazon Alexa. She says, Alexa, set the timer for 45 minutes. And then it's Alexa who's the bad guy. It's not me. It's not daddy who says now it's time to put away the iPad. It's the Alexa that tells her. Now there are different tools, right? She can set timers on screen time. The Apple iOS now comes with these tools built in. And so there are many, many technologies out there that can help the children regulate themselves. Of course, if they break that trust, if we see, repeatedly, you're not doing what you said you would do, well, now we're going to have a conversation. Maybe you're not ready for that much screen time. Let's talk about that.
Okay, fantastic. That's awesome. All right, so let's talk about the book Indistractable. I've read it twice now, and I can tell that you put a lot of heart, time, effort, soul into writing and creating that book. So why don't you share with us what were you hoping to achieve with the book, and what is the impact you're hoping it's going to have on the world?
Yeah, so it's really about, I think what's happening today is that there's a bifurcation between people who let their time, their attention, and their lives be controlled by others, and people who stand up and say, no, I want to control my attention. I want to control my time. I want to control my life. I want to become indistractable. And becoming indistractable doesn't mean you never get distracted, right? It's a made-up word. I made it up. So I get to define it. And becoming indistractable doesn't mean you never get distracted. That's impossible. What it does mean, however, is that you have a system in place to recognize why you got distracted so that you can do something about it in the future. There's that saying that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, how many of us get distracted by the same things day after day after day, whether it's work or the news or even our kids take us off track? We keep getting distracted. We don't do anything to fix it. Well, so here's how we fix it. Here's how we do what we say we're going to do. Becoming indistractable is very simply about striving to do what you say you're going to do. It's about living with personal integrity. We would never imagine lying to our friends, lying to our family, lying to our colleagues, and yet we lie to ourselves all the time. We say we're going to work out. We don't. We say we're going to eat healthy. We don't. We say we're going to work on that big project. We procrastinate. We say we're going to be fully present with our kids, but here we are on our cell phones and we should be with them. So the idea here is, how do we simply do what we say we're going to do? That to me is the superpower of this century.
Amazing. And where can people go to learn about the book, to get the book?
Sure. So it's called indistractable.com. Sorry, the book is called Indistractable. They can go to indistractable.com is the website. And at indistractable.com, there's an 80-page workbook that didn't fit into the print edition. So it's complimentary. It's a great guide for the book. There's also a free video course that's available there as well. And if you want to check out my personal website, that's called nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name, Nir. So nirandfar.com.
Okay. And I know you also mentioned there's a scheduling tool that you made available for free as well.
Right.
So for anyone listening, there's so much. He probably just covered half of the good stuff you can get on the site.
There's a lot more.
You totally should go. Yeah, there's a whole lot more.
Yeah.
You totally should go check it out. It's totally free, totally complimentary. And that's because he really means it when he says that he really wants people to develop the most important skill of the century. Okay, so I have one final question for you.
Sure.
So imagine you are 80 years old, right? It's your birthday, your family is around you, and your daughter, who is now 11, I believe.
Yeah.
She's 11. And your daughter stands up to talk about the impact that you had in her life and how you helped shape who she became. What would you hope that she would say?
Oh my God, I'm gonna start crying here. This is a tough question. I would hope that she would say that maybe I taught her that it's okay to put yourself out there, that it's okay to sometimes have a contrarian opinion. I think it was Ben Franklin said that if everybody thinks the same thing, then nobody's thinking.
Yeah.
And I think the conversation right now is very one-sided. Everyone agrees that technology is so evil and it's hijacking your brain and video games do this and social media does that. Who stands up and say, actually, guys, it's on us. We're doing it to ourselves and we can do something about it. And I take a lot of flack for that. People don't like that, right? They say, who's this guy who wrote Hooked and now wrote Indistractable? But this is the truth. What if this guy's right? Right? What if this guy actually did 5 years of research to prove to himself as much as everyone else that this is what is really going on? That's, I think, what I'd like her to know is that it's sometimes it's okay to get a little flack for your opinions as long as you believe that you're in the right and that you're doing something to help others.
Fantastic. Hey, Nir, my friend, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for all that you've shared today. Thank you for the work you put into the book, and we wish you massive amounts of success with the book launch.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All
It's
right.
been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Take care, my friend. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've spent some time listening to my friend Nir. He's such an amazing guy, and you really have to get the book, because what we covered today is just a thin slice of what the book really is about. After I read the book, the first thing I did was turn off most of the notifications on my phone, and I saw my productivity at work skyrocket. I'd get home and I'd put my phone on airplane mode because I wanted to spend time with my family. But there's so many other things that are in the book that are applicable and that you can begin to utilize and implement immediately that will improve the quality of your sex life. Yes, it's right there in the book, of your family life, and of your productivity at the office. So once again, thanks so much for joining us. If you haven't already subscribed, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember to subscribe so that every time we bring on guests like this, you get notified. And if you're on Facebook as well, remember to follow our Conscious Parenting Live page. So every time we have people on like this, you get notified. Thank you very much. And until next time, my friends, take care.